It's great to be here. It's a great audience here at Leendus. Not just a great audience, but a friendly audience. And not just a friendly audience, but I noticed a particularly attractive audience as well. So I thought I'd just start by just taking a couple of pictures of you, because you're a very attractive audience here. In fact, of all the audiences I've addressed, you're probably the most recent. Anyway, what I want to do to you is talk, what I want to do with you, I should say, is talk about why nerds aren't heard. And this is my agenda for this evening. I'd like to talk about the problem as I perceive it, and why nerds need to be heard better, the 7 ways that geeks sabotage their own presentations, and the protocols that I have boiled great presentations down into, and a magical factor. How does that sound? Is that okay with everybody? Good. All right, okay. But before we carry on, it's important for you as an audience to get to know each other just a little bit better. And so I've prepared a special geometric test. It's very easy. All you have to do is pick your favourite shape. Couldn't be easier. So just home in on whichever shape you think is your favourite shape. Okay, has everybody got one? Excellent, okay. Now let's just see who's who. Now, who are the triangles? Okay, pop your hands high, look around at the triangles, nothing to be ashamed of at all, because triangles are the ambitious people. They're very directed. The shape says it all. They know where they're going, and they've probably got an action plan about how to get there. Okay, what about the squares? Who are the squares? Hands up again. Have a good look around at the squares. These are people to keep track of as well, because these are the detailed conscious people. They're very precise. They like to colour right up to the edges and into the corners. You know the kind of thing I mean. How about the circles? And an unusually high number of circles in the audience tonight. Have a good look around, because usually at a technical gathering, there's not so many circles. Keep your hands up, because the circles are the people. They're a bit inclusive. They're good at talking to other people and getting others involved. All right, now that only leaves one group, the squiggly lines. Okay, keep your hands up, because the squiggly lines, and keep your hands up, because squiggly lines usually have an unhealthy obsession. Okay, no, keep your hands up, because I'm gonna go through what they are. So it's either Taylor Swift, the singer, could be Tom Cruise, or maybe it's working with a lean and or agile methodology. Probably the last one. Anyway, the good news is that the talk I'm doing tonight does apply to all categories of people. So I hope you're going to get something from it. So here's the problem as I see it. The problem is that it's great being a geek. I love being a geek. And as a geek, you probably get your own corner of the office. You might get pizzas on a Friday. You might get to share the in jokes and wear the in T-shirts with, there are 1-0 categories of people, those who understand binary and those that don't, those kind of things. However, round the corner, there's the sales guy with his luxury expense company car, with all of the trappings that go with being a salesman. And it struck me, as I'd been through a few different technical companies, hang on a minute, who is it that makes and supports this stuff? It's the geeks. But who's getting paid a lot and recognised a lot? It's the it's the salespeople. Now, what I don't want to do is minimise what the salespeople get, because that's a skill in and of itself, isn't it? A very useful one. However, I do think that geeks should get more. And when I say get more, it's more of the recognition, the pay, and the rewards in general that salespeople traditionally get. I think geeks should get more of that, because geeks hold a lot of value. The difficulty is, I believe, that geeks... I don't know what happened there. The difficulty is, I believe, that geeks don't convey their value in a way that the rest of the world can understand. They can talk to other geeks, but not necessarily to less technical people. And so what I want to do is help geeks to be more, do more, and therefore have more in general, more in success. And my chosen field is presentations, and so when I was thinking about how I could help geeks, I thought the best place I can help geeks is to make better presentations. So that's where I want to focus. So in a meetup like this, it's great because it's usually technical people talking to other technical people or agile people talking to other agile people. So there's a degree of rapport, there's a degree of connection already there. However, when we go into the rest of the world, we have to make presentations to less technical people. And that might be job interviews. A lot of job interviews involve giving a presentation these days. It might also be showing your non-tech colleagues what you do and communicating to the rest of the company the role that you fulfill. It could be assisting in a sales presentation or even attracting funding because you're wanting to take your company to the next level. And what I would argue is that usually the decision makers on the end, the receiving end of those presentations, are not technical people. And so as a geek, we need to learn to speak to less technical audiences in order to convey our value properly. And I would say that if you are a geek and you learn to speak then, there's so much success that you can achieve not only in the area of presentations, but the confidence you build in presenting will rub off into other areas of your life and you'll be successful in many other places. Now, who recognizes this diagram? Have you ever seen this kind of thing happening? And by the way, I do want to encourage audience participation here. What is the problem that we've got when we see that screen? Sorry? A network. We've got a bad connection, haven't we? Well done, sir. I've got my participation treats here. And you are our first winner. And very conveniently on the front row as well. Well done, sir. Excellent stuff. Yeah, when you see that happening, you've got a poor connection. Okay, and what I would suggest is that as a geek, you need to establish a connection with your audience. It's a bit like a broadband connection, but the rest of the world would call it rapport. You establish a rapport or a connection with the audience. And what I'm going to do is reveal 7 key power presenting protocols that I have described in order to get to that rapport. So what are these protocols? The first one is the purpose of your presentation. Now, be very honest. If you're asked to deliver a presentation, what's the first thing you do? Okay. Yeah, somebody's going to jump on the PowerPoint slides or Keynote or Prezi or whatever it is and start hacking. Who said that? Who said content? Well, it's you, sir. Let's give you a press. Let's give you... Now, this is a bit difficult because there's a camera right behind you. I'm going to try. Oh, not bad, not bad. Could have been worse. Yeah. The very first thing that a lot of geeks will do is start hacking on a presentation, thinking that they're, hacking on PowerPoint slides, thinking that they're creating a presentation. But what we need to do is to take a step back and think about the overall purpose of the presentation. If somebody asked you to give the presentation, I would class them as the sponsor. You're also going to have a group of people that are your audience. And I would say it's very important to step back and think about the purpose of the presentation and get that purpose agreed with the sponsor and the audience ahead of time. Did you notice at the beginning of this presentation, I showed you what I was going to go through, and I said, is that okay with you to go through that? And you all went, yes, because I was gaining your agreement as the audience into what we were going to do. And that buy-in is important. So you've got to have the purpose. And I would define the purpose in an overall aim for a presentation and a set of objectives, and we'll come to that in a moment. Then we've got the plan. You've got to have a plan for a presentation. You've got to put the structure in place. You've got to access the keys to people's memories. And a good structure, I'm sure you've heard this before, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You've heard this so many times, haven't you? Some people say, you've got to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Other people say, you've got to tell them how you're going to bore them, and then tell them how you bored them. But you do need a structure, and that's because the human attention span is only a finite amount of time, and it peaks at the very beginning and at the very end. That's why the ads that you see on TV between the programs, the first ad is more expensive than the ads in the middle, and the last ad is more expensive because they get into people's mind more quickly. So when you're planning a presentation, you should make use of people's attention spans, and also the keys to memory as well. And the keys, there are 5 keys to putting things into people's memories. Very quickly, if we've got time to go, I think we have got time to go through them. The 5 keys. First one, firsts. As I already said, primacy. The first thing you do is always memorable. You remember your first day in a job. You remember your last day in a job. You don't tend to remember all the days in the middle. You remember the beginning of a movie. You remember the end of a movie. You don't remember everything in between. So first and last, primacy and recency, keys to people's memory. The next thing is links to what you already know. So, for instance, if you start explaining some principle which is new to people, but you can link it to something they already know. And a common example of that is when you're trying to explain Ohm's law about resistance in electrical circuits, you can talk about a hose pipe and water flowing through it, and when you put your foot on the hose pipe, you restrict the flow. Using a link to something that people already know, an analogy, is another key to accessing memory. First, last, links to what you already know. Repetition is also a key. Repetition is the mother of learning. It's also the distant cousin of boredom. So you have to be a little bit careful. Don't want to bore people to death, but you do want a bit of repetition in there. And then the very last thing is outstanding things. Outstanding things always feature in people's memories. If I showed you 50 photos of my recent holiday in America, you might remember the first, you might remember the last, you'd definitely remember anything that was repeated, you'd remember pictures of places you had already been, but if every photo was a landscape scene and one of them was a small tropical bird riding a bicycle, you would remember that one because it would be outstanding. And so those are the way. Anyway, we'd better move on. Then you've got the preparation. Has it ever struck you, as a technical person, that other people in the world are different to you? And that they might learn differently? The trouble is, we tend to go to our home base of learning. We tend to run to our own learning style when we put together a presentation because we think that's the way other people learn. And of course they don't. More of that a little bit later. Then we've got practice. Now, this is where geeks fall down a lot. They kind of hack about on their slides, they do the content, and this is usually the most practice a geek ever gives on a presentation. He reads the slides and thinks, yeah, when that slide's up, I'll say this. And when that slides up, I'll say, that's not good practice. You need to practice out loud to a real-life audience, or at least into your phone or iPad or whatever. You need to do it many times. And given we said that the beginning of the presentation and the end of the presentation are very important, you should practice those parts even more than the rest. So if you practice your presentation 5 times, you should practice the beginning and the end 10 times. This is tough, isn't it? But you want to be outstanding in your presentations because you want to get that job or attract that funding or whatever it might be. Then we've got participation. Participation is the absolute key, getting people involved, because people don't like having things done to them. However, they love having things done with them or even for them. Then we've got the performance of actually delivering the presentation, and there are things to learn about there. And lastly, an often forgotten part, is the post-event. What do we do after the presentation? Have we achieved the outcome we wanted to? Has the change of behaviour occurred? Has the new working practice been adopted? Has the buying pattern been established? We never tend to look after the event and find out what's going on. So those are the 7 protocols. So let's just think about that learning contract very, very quickly. Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said you've got to begin with the end in mind. And I would say that the learning contract that you should put together with your sponsor, the person that asks you to do the presentation, and the audience, and obviously, if you're going to address an audience of, say, 300 people, you can't talk to all 300 in advance. You might be able to get in connection with a couple of them and talk to them, and you can, of course, ask the audience at the beginning of the presentation. But you get them on the same page using a learning contract, and we use SMART objectives. Has anybody ever come across SMART objectives? A few people. I'm afraid I haven't got enough chocolate to give everybody that has come across SMART objectives. But here's the boiled down version. The S is specific. You've got to be able to know exactly what you're trying to aim at. The M is measurable. I could say I've got an objective of losing weight. But how much weight am I going to lose? We've got to be able to measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Now, the A is sometimes achievable, but I prefer to go with agreed, because you should agree your objectives with everybody involved. Then the R is realistic. It's no good setting objectives that just cannot be achieved. And lastly, the T is time-bound. These are the way of framing objectives which you can use with an audience and a sponsor to make sure that your purpose is going to be achieved. Then, do you remember I was talking about different learning styles? Now, I want to use an example here. Imagine if you were all given a Christmas gift of a brand new digital video recorder, you know, a little DVR thingy. How many people would just rip it all open, plug it in and start playing with it?